conference. Now it's my privilege to invite Dr. Anil Kakodkar, the chief guest of this function, to give a special address. But before I do that, let me tell you briefly about him. Dr. Kakodkar is a well-known nuclear scientist. He was the director of the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, Mumbai. Later, he took up the responsibility as chairman, Atomic Energy Commission, and the secretary to the Government of India, Department of Atomic Energy, in 2000. And he held these positions until 2009. Currently, he is Department of Atomic Energy Homi Bhabha Chair Professor at Bhabha Atomic Research Center. Dr. Kakodkar devotes his time primarily on issues related to energy, education, and societal development. Dr. Kakodkar has been conferred with 3 prestigious national awards of the Government of India, namely Padma Shri in 1998, Padma Bhushan in 1999, and Padma Vibhushan in 2009. This list will give you an idea about his significant contribution towards national development. Dr. Kakodkar has notable innovative contributions to human resource development activities, like, for example, establishment of National Institute of Science, Education and Research, Department of Atomic Energy, Mumbai University Center for Basic Sciences, and Homi Bhabha National Institute. Dr. Kakodkar has worked for the development of atomic energy program in India throughout his professional life. Main focus of his work has been on self-reliant development of nuclear reactor system to address the Indian program requirement. He has been a key contributor to India's strategic program. Dr. Kakodkar was chairman, Solar Energy Corporation in its formative stage. He was also chairman of the Inter-University Center for Astronomy and Astrophysics during 2006 to 2012. He is a recipient of many academic honors and has large number of achievements to his credit. The list is too long. I am not going to read that. Instead, I request Dr. Kakodkar to deliver his special lecture. Dr. Anil Kakodkar.
Dr. Bedekar, Dr. Sarma, Dr. Agarkar, distinguished experts from different parts of the world who are here to enlighten us about the works and contributions of Bhaskaracharya, invitees to this conference, ladies and gentlemen. I have been given this task of delivering a special address or a special lecture, and I don't know what that means. I'm clearly not a specialist in the subject matter of this particular conference. But at the same time, it's clear to me, as it is clear to all of us in this hall and maybe many others outside, that this particular event is quite special, quite unique in many ways. And so, first of all, I would like to compliment the organizers, the Vidya Prasarak Mandal, and indeed everyone connected with organization of this conference for undertaking this task. I think 900th birth anniversary of Bhaskaracharya in reality should be or should have been a major national event where all Indians could celebrate the distinctive achievement of scholars like Bhaskaracharya. And it's happening, just as it's happening here, it's happening in few other places. But it doesn't seem to be a major national celebration, which it should have been. And in fact, if I can express my anguish, many of the national bodies, when I inquired about what's happening, they came to realize that this is 900th year of Bhaskaracharya only after making that inquiry. So I think a comment was made that we are poor in terms of archiving, documenting history. But I think the problem seems to be deeper than that. And so in that background, in that light, that this event and this meeting is being organized here really stands out. And I wish to again congratulate Dr. Bedekar and everyone connected with this conference for being sensitive, being so connected with the history of science, history of mathematics, history of ancient Indian heritage, and so on and so forth. Dr. Ram Subramanian is sitting here, and because I'm also connected with IIT, I had an occasion to meet him a couple of times. I also had an occasion to listen to him. And after that, I don't know that he remembers, but I did ask him that whatever he is able to do in terms of mathematics and history of mathematics, whether somebody who knows mathematics will be able to do that, or somebody who knows only mathematics and not Sanskrit. And also on the other hand, whether somebody who knows Sanskrit but doesn't know mathematics will be able to do such a thing. And he clearly said that that's likely to be difficult. If we have to really understand our heritage, if we have to really know how this science in India evolved, how this technology in India evolved, then I think it's important that we need a large breed of people who understand both Sanskrit as well as the concerned branch of knowledge, be it mathematics, be it science, technology, or any other branch of knowledge. And it's very clear that there are not many people like those who are present in this small hall. And in years to come, I think this problem is going to be even more difficult. And so there must be a fair degree of urgency in terms of understanding our past and properly documenting it. And so I think that's a very strong enough reason to recognize such people, such scholars, to pay our respects to them and support them in every way. Because I think if we don't do this work of understanding our past rapidly enough, there is a high chance that even the chance that we have to unearth whatever heritage that is there will slowly become smaller and smaller, and time may come that we may lose it altogether. And that brings me to yet another issue, and this is connected with our see, it's clear that see, 900 years ago, Bhaskaracharya did so much of work. Mention was made about the Delhi pillar, the restless wonder. And so Indians knew metallurgy of iron, metallurgy of steel, metallurgy of bronzes. And many of them were way ahead of the rest of the world. We seem to have lost all that. I think the question that we must pose ourselves is, why is it that the continuity of knowledge, which is so important, cannot be ensured? What is it that we need to do to ensure continuity of knowledge? There may be several reasons. There may be reasons related to our attitudes. There may be external factors well beyond our control. There may be reasons related to non-availability of adequate facilities, or shall I say technologies. But surely there must be a way to ensure continuity of knowledge in spite of these factors, and that is something we need to worry about. In fact, see, you look at institutions. We are sitting here in an education institutions. There are examples of institutions which have maintained themselves at the level of a very high level of excellence for centuries, or some even longer. There are living examples of this kind of institutions by way of, for example, Cambridge, Oxford in UK. In our own place, if you look at the duration over which the knowledge institutions existed and maintained excellence over long periods of time, we have examples here of institutions like Nalanda, Takshashila. If you really look at their dates, they are really long compared to what we see now. We have, in the post-independent India, we have, of course, several new institutions. Many of them are, in fact, institutions of high excellence. Many of them have maintained their level of excellence, or for that matter, have enriched that excellence even further over a period of 5 decades, 6 decades. But there is a much larger number of institutions which have in fact decayed in matter of decades. And that is something that we need to worry about, how to set up institutions of high excellence, and how to ensure that those institutions survive. Those institutions sustain their activities for centuries, if not millennia. And so obviously these institutions have to have some ingredients which are larger than the states, more important than the state, more permanent than the state. And I think knowledge institutions have that possibilities. In past, it has been like that. And as long as we are able to create such institutions, I think that's, to my mind, one single factor which will enable continuity of knowledge. And alongside efforts to preserve history, which of course is extremely important, but I think we need to work towards defining what are those ingredients which make these institutions remain at level of high excellence for long periods of time. And I'm not going to go any further in this area, but I think we have plenty of example, including what we are going to discuss here, where we can recreate or regain that capability. Another colleague of mine or another friend of mine from IIT, Professor Kirti Trivedi, he, long time back, I'm telling you something which is maybe 40, 50 years ago, or maybe 30, 40 years ago, where he researched on the ancient Hindu temples and related the architecture of those temples with the world of fractals. And it's a small paper, but it was very interesting to figure out that the principles of temple architecture, the proportions, geometrical proportions which have been used both in terms of features inside the temple as well as the larger temple constructions, are actually very strongly based on fractals. And that in turn relates to the question of self-similarity, and that in turn relates to the question of life. Now, to me, it looks that while the knowledge activity in past had something very pure, something very pious, it also had this great linkage between something of that kind and something which is highly utility oriented. And so, talking in modern language, for example, we talk about basic research, or talking about mathematics, we talk about pure mathematics. And then we talk about applied research, or talking about mathematics, we talk about applied mathematics. And it's clear that our ancient Indian heritage has always treated these two things together. Although there may be people practicing one side more intensely than the other, and there may be other people practicing the other part more intensely than others. But and the point of time when the two got segregated, the silos got built, I think, just as I mentioned, the decay of institutions could have been responsible for disruption in continuity of knowledge. I also feel that this segregation in terms of the approach to knowledge which got set in, that also to some extent might have been responsible. And I think it's absolutely important that talking about mathematics, for example, I think if mathematics has to be made very popular among the younger people, children, I think we must present mathematics to them in its totality. We must present mathematics, how it evolved in India, how it evolved in the rest of the world. We must bring them as they go to higher levels in terms of the evolution of mathematics, the new research in mathematics. But at the same time, we must take them towards the applicable or applied part of mathematics and leave the option of how to use that mathematics, how to pursue themselves in mathematics. Leave it to them. Some may pursue research, some may get into the world of even, I would say, world of finance, world of share market, for example. And it is this awareness of several facets of this particular branch of knowledge and the possibility for students to choose a career depending on their aptitude. And I think it is this possibility that will make this subject more popular among students. And so talking in the context of this particular thing where I said earlier, I think even this combination of mathematics and Sanskrit, I think we must look at ways of how to make this combination popular among children. First of all, I think we must create enough choices for students. I think in today's setting, it must be pretty difficult for somebody to pursue Sanskrit and mathematics or Sanskrit and science, say modern science and Sanskrit together. Many places, our own ordinances and regulations will will pose barriers for that. And I think we need to change that. And if it's only through such facilities that we can get young people interested in this area, young people to both unearth our past as well as explore our future on the basis of a particular branch of knowledge, in which while they pursue and derive a lot of pleasure out of that pursuit, they can also see a lucrative career in the same branch of knowledge. And I think we need to pursue the knowledge activities with such an perspective. The last point that I wish to make is about the fact that we have this tradition of independent thinkers. We have this tradition where people have, on the basis of their own independent thinking, come to several important conclusions, come to several new findings. I think in the larger pursuit of scientific research, this approach of independence, we have to do scientific research, you have to be in a community of peers. And that community does not recognize any geographical boundaries. So you have got to be in a global community of peers in your particular area. Because that's the only way you can make your findings, your research known to others, and also you benefit from the findings or the research done elsewhere. But that should not mean that we get influenced by, while we benefit from research going on outside, the spirit of inquiry must have a certain degree of independence. It cannot be that we are pursuing a line of inquiry because that line has been set by somebody else. While benefiting from research elsewhere is, I think, very essential, crucial, but lack of independent thinking, in fact, to me it looks is a barrier to doing very high quality research. And I think exposure to several people who have done very fundamental work, who have created new knowledge way ahead of others. I think, for example, Bhaskaracharya, I think his period, if I mistake not, is just 500 years before Newton, roughly, right? And he, in many ways, did significant things in calculus. So now the question is, why not young Indian students be aware of the fact that things can happen way ahead of others? And I think that's one message, if we can reach to the our young community by way of programs of this kind and also many others of this kind, then I think that itself would be a new awareness, new awakening, and new enthusiasm for young community. So all in all, it seems to me that there are many lessons for us to learn from the life and work of a stalwart like Bhaskaracharya, and I indeed feel very gratified that so many scholars on Bhaskaracharya are here to enlighten us, and I'm sure the participants would derive maximum benefit from this possibility over the next few days. I know that your serious business starts tomorrow, and I do hope that all of you would go back much more enlightened and much richer after this treat of Bhaskaracharya, both in terms of mathematics, in terms of poetry, and also in terms of astronomy. And I wish to again thank Dr. Bedekar for me to have this opportunity to come here today evening and be with all of you. Thank you very much.